A quiet night shatters as masked robbers invade Lucy's home, trapping her and her daughter Jordan. When tensions between the robbers flare,
Fuck, man.
Jordan grabs a knife, sparking a fierce fight. With boiling water in hand, Lucy makes a daring move. You won't believe what happens next. Stay till the end to find out. Today we will be recapping the 2018 movie called Death Wish. The movie begins in Chicago. A police car drives toward the hospital as one of its officers fights for his life after a shooting. The moment they arrive, the medical team calls for Dr. Paul Kersey, the hospital's top surgeon, only to find he's too late. The officer has passed away. The next day, Paul, his wife Lucy, and daughter Jordan enjoy breakfast together, thrilled about Jordan's acceptance to a New York college. Later, they attend Jordan's football game, where they cheer her on until a loudmouth dad causes a scene. Unable to ignore it, Paul politely asks him to quiet down, sparking a heated argument that almost turns into a physical fight. Lucy steps in, steering Paul away as the man yells after him. After the game, they meet Paul's brother, Frank, at a cafe. As they chat, Frank asks Paul for a loan, and Paul agrees. Nearby, the valet, Miguel, overhears their conversation and the family's plans to be out for the night. When he retrieves the car, Miguel discreetly snaps a picture of their home address from the GPS. That evening, as the family prepares to go out for Paul's birthday celebration, he gets an urgent call from the hospital. He heads back, leaving Lucy and Jordan to grab groceries and return home. They don't notice a strange car parked nearby. Jordan goes upstairs to call a friend, while Lucy, busy baking a cake, is unaware of the shadow lurking by the door. A draft flips the pages of Lucy's cookbook, and she notices the window slightly open, with muddy footprints trailing inside. She calls for Jordan, but upstairs, a masked robber catches Jordan as she tries to leave her room. Soon she's ushered downstairs, joining Lucy as two more robbers appear, warning Lucy that any resistance will endanger her daughter. Their leader drags Lucy to the safe, demanding she fill it with valuables. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, one robber holding a knife gets scolded by his partner, who then steps outside to find a rope. Left alone for a moment, the knife-wielding thief moves to harass Jordan, only to be interrupted when his partner returns, firmly warning him to back off. Tensions rise between the two, sparking a heated argument. Jordan seizes the robber's distraction, grabbing the knife and slashing one of them before another strikes her, knocking her to the ground. At that moment, Lucy is led back into the kitchen by the third robber. Seeing the chaos, Lucy quickly grabs a pot of boiling water, splashing it over one attacker and shouting for Jordan to run. But the robbers regain control. At the hospital, Paul overhears an announcement about two critically injured female patients. He tries to join the case, but his colleagues hold him back. They reveal the heartbreaking news. Lucy didn't make it, and Jordan is in surgery. In shock, Paul rushes to the morgue, devastated to see Lucy's lifeless body. Afterward, Detectives Raines and Jackson meet with Paul, going over questions and listing everything missing from the safe. Paul's brother, Frank, arrives, furious, and confronts the detectives. Paul calms him, and the detectives promise to pursue the attackers. A nurse then informs them that Jordan has survived surgery but remains in a coma. At Lucy's funeral, her father Ben delivers a solemn speech. On the way home, he spots something that rekindles his anger and drives to his property, where two poachers scatter. Ben fires a few shots but misses, telling Paul he doesn't trust the police to act until it's too late. Later, frustrated by the lack of progress from Detective Raines, Paul snaps at a homeless man cleaning his windshield. At the hospital, he finds comfort in seeing Jordan's friend reading to her, grateful for her support during this tough time. Meanwhile, Paul starts therapy, revealing that he can't sleep in his bed, spending restless nights on the couch. Memories of his strained childhood resurface, recalling lonely train rides to escape his father. Now he rides those same trains, lost in thought. The therapist reminds him that healing takes time, but Paul's days blur together as he reads to Jordan and drifts between train stations. One day, he sees the same homeless man from before and decides to let him clean his car window, even offering some money. Weeks drift on, and still no word comes from the police, pushing Paul to confront Detective Raines. He questions him about the DNA samples, only to learn they didn't match anyone in the database. A quick glance around Raines's office reveals a crowded board of unsolved cases. Paul leaves the train station and notices two men harassing a young woman. Stepping in, he demands they stop. but the men turn on him, giving him a harsh beating while the girl escapes. Then he returns home and flips on the TV, only to be struck by a commercial for a local firearms store. The next day, curiosity leads him to the store, where the clerk walks him through various firearms, but the paperwork, gun safety classes, and ever-present security cameras leave him hesitant. Not long after, Paul is back at the hospital with a gunshot victim. As the body is prepped for surgery, a firearm slips from the patient's pocket. Seizing the opportunity, Paul discreetly nudges the gun under the table, tucking it into his scrubs to take home. Over the next few days, Paul devotes himself to gun tutorials and practice sessions, gradually building his accuracy. One day, Paul is summoned to the ICU with urgent news. Jordan has suffered a seizure. As Jordan's condition deteriorates, her prognosis grows darker. Seeing her restrained for safety fills Paul with rage, knowing his daughter lies strapped to a bed while the people responsible remain free. Meanwhile, Paul ventures into Chicago's rougher neighborhoods with the gun. Spotting two men attempting to hijack a woman's car, he confronts them, only for them to retaliate with gunfire before speeding off. Paul dodges the bullets, fires back, hits the driver, and causes a crash. A piece of glass cuts his hand, and as the passenger stumbles out, shooting wildly, Paul takes him down with a headshot. Unseen, a stranger records it all from a nearby window. After a final shot to ensure safety, Paul tells the woman to escape, disposes of his hoodie, and catches the train home. In his apartment, he treats his wound, haunted by restless nights and kept calm only by his therapist's medication. Soon, detectives Raines and Jackson arrive. The woman he saved is grateful, but the video recording of the incident, circulating online, raises suspicions, especially since the shooter's injured hand is visible in the footage. The next day, Paul sees the viral video of himself and feels a strange satisfaction that eases his guilt. Some praise his courage, while others criticize his ruthlessness. At work, he hides his injured hand when officers are around. Later, he treats a young shooting victim, coaxing him into revealing his attacker. A dealer known as the Ice Cream Man, Paul discreetly notes the address and, after his shift, grabs a hoodie from the hospital laundry. That night, he tracks down the dealer, shoots him, and slips away as locals scavenge the dealer's cart. When detectives arrive, Raines notices kids imitating the shooting, including one boy who mimics the left-handed Grim Reaper from the video, sparking his suspicion that it's the same vigilante. At the police station, the detectives endure a reprimand from their superior, who's frustrated by the rogue vigilante. Their only clues: the shooter is left-handed and lacks refined firearm skills. In therapy, Paul seems so revitalized that his therapist praises his progress, urging him to continue whatever he's been doing. Afterward, Paul's surgical patient leaves him stunned. It's Miguel, the valet, and Paul spots his own missing watch on the man's wrist. His attempts to save Miguel aren't successful. He becomes lifeless. Paul sneaks into the ambulance, uses Miguel's finger to unlock his phone, and grabs the watch. Back in his office, he scrolls through Miguel's photos and is horrified to find one taken inside his own car. Digging deeper, he sees a photo of a liquor store tied to stolen goods. He considers calling the detectives but decides to handle it solo. When Frank visits, Paul cancels their plans, hiding his injured hand. Later, he takes another hospital hoodie and heads to the shady liquor store, posing as Miguel's friend. The owner, spotting the hospital logo, discreetly texts a friend for backup and reaches for a revolver. Seeing the move in a mirror, Paul nails his hand to the bar with a dart, demanding access to the stolen goods. Under pressure, the owner takes him to a back safe, where Paul finds his family's valuables. Fish bursts in, gun blazing, but Paul, watching the security cameras, dodges, causing Fish's shot to hit his own friend. Then, Fish fires wildly. Paul dives for cover to reload, but when Fish slips in blood, Paul seizes a guitar, smashing it over him and blocking his retreat with furniture. Fish dodges to the bar, but Paul, tracking his moves on the security feed, shoots him in the leg, forcing him down. Stepping on Fish's injured leg, Paul demands the truth about Lucy's killer. In agony, Fish confesses it was a mechanic named Joe, whose address is saved on his phone. As Paul reaches for it, Fish kicks him, sending Paul crashing into a shelf. As Fish stands and aims his gun, a bowling ball falls from above, hitting him on the head and knocking him out. Paul seizes the chance, grabs Fish's gun, and finishes him off. He quickly grabs the security hard drives, but, in his escape, his ring slips off, left unnoticed on the floor. At the hospital, Paul discreetly pockets syringes and medication for his next encounter. Detectives Rains and Jackson then arrive, showing him a photo of Fish and his lost ring, which they assume was stolen by criminals. They're pleased with the break in the case. After they leave, Paul destroys Fish's phone, wiping out any leads. Later, Paul slips into Joe's auto shop undetected. He finds Joe working under a car and knocks him out with a wrench. When Joe awakens, bound and helpless, Paul begins a harsh interrogation, injecting him and pouring brake fluid on a deep cut, intensifying the pain. Under duress, Joe reveals that Lucy's real killer is a man named Knox, who's notorious for only meeting people on his terms. With the information he needs, Paul thanks Joe, but as he leaves, he pulls a chain that releases the car, crushing Joe. The next day, Detectives Rains and Jackson visit Frank, piecing together that the Grim Reaper has been targeting those responsible for Lucy's death. They ask to see his hand, suspecting an injury might link him to the vigilante killings. Meanwhile, Paul visits Jordan in the hospital, noticing a news report about copycats inspired by the Grim Reaper. Then his phone got a message, inviting him to meet at a crowded nightclub in 30 minutes. Paul heads to the club, while Frank, suspicious, lets himself into Paul's basement, discovering dismissal of Paul's home and signs of his brother's spiral into darkness, realizing Paul is the Grim Reaper. At the club, Paul messages Knox, who directs him to the bathroom. Following the sound of a ringing phone, Paul kicks open a stall door, only to find an empty phone. Suddenly, Knox appears, using a stranger as a shield while firing recklessly, hitting others. Paul, injured, ducks into a stall and fires back, wounding Knox. In desperation, Paul shoots the power box, plunging the club into darkness, and escapes unnoticed in the panicked crowd. After the shooting, detectives arrive at the hospital, where Knox, one of the victims, claims he saw the shooter. Meanwhile, Paul, hiding in another hospital room, patches up his wound. Back home, Paul faces Frank's anger but insists his actions were necessary, until detectives arrive. Frank convinces them Paul isn't there, and they leave. Soon after, Paul learns that Jordan is awake. He rushes to her, delivering the heartbreaking news of her mother's death. With Jordan now home, detectives question her, but she remembers nothing. In an elevator, they encounter Knox, who subtly threatens Paul, prompting him to legally purchase firearms for protection. That evening, sensing movement outside, Paul tells Jordan to hide. Two robbers break in. One is fooled by a decoy in Paul's room, while Paul ambushes the other in the bathroom. Hearing noise in the basement, he heads down but is shot by Knox, collapsing onto the couch. Jordan's scream distracts Knox, giving Paul just enough time to grab a hidden weapon and end Knox once and for all. When the police arrive, Paul tells detectives he bought the firearms legally to protect Jordan after she woke up, promising to give them up and implying his vigilante days are over. Though skeptical, the detectives decide to drop the matter. The movie ends with Paul dropping Jordan off at college in New York, where her friend waits to greet her. As he heads back to his car, Paul spots a man snatching a bag from a bellhop's cart. Without thinking, he gestures a finger gun at the thief. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.